Hi SHS students, this is Mr. Carlson here. I'm excited to be joining you by video to go over the SHS Student Handbook review for the 2021-2022 school year. This is never the most exciting thing that I get to do as principal, and it probably won't be the most exciting thing that you do today, let alone this week or this year. But with a little bit of attention from you and the cooperation of your classroom teacher, we'll get this done in a manner that hopefully is informative and thorough, but doesn't take too long and get you back to teaching and learning as soon as possible. The first thing I need to make sure that all students know is where to access their handbook. The fact is, by the time you're watching this video, the handbook has been emailed to each and every student. The only exception there might be somebody who transferred in the first week or so of school and is watching this video before we've had a chance to send it to them. In addition to your email, you can find it at all times on the SHS website. So I'll try to quickly show you where to find that. You go to sandusky.k12.mi.us, and then under the Junior Senior High School tab, click on Student Handbook. At the time I'm recording this, we don't have the most updated version of the handbook on the website, but we will soon. And you can find your handbook at all times on the school website, in addition to the one that I emailed to you. Because this handbook is 70-some pages long, we no longer print a hard copy and hand it out to all students. That is something we used to do, but using school Chromebooks and Google accounts has made it easier to rely on electronic copies. That said, if you want a hard copy, come into the office and request one. Give us about 24 hours to get one printed up, and we'll get it to you or your parents if that's who's making the request. Your teacher should have passed out an acknowledgement form to you. So teacher, if that was something you forgot to do, here's your friendly reminder. The acknowledgement form gets filled out by the students as we go over this video review, and it's going to look like this. Students, I'll be going over, I think it's about 7 or 8 specific points of the handbook that time has shown us to be sort of the most important, either because of the frequency that these things get confused by students, or simply because of the severity of what will happen if students don't follow the procedures and protocols that we have in place. So as I go through this video review, point by point, I ask you to initial after each item that we review together. And then when you get to the bottom, I ask you to print your name, put down what grade you're in, sign it, and date it. Your teacher will collect it, and the teacher hands it into the office. And then office staff will go through and make sure that we have them all. If we miss somebody, then we'll follow up individually. So again, just a little bit of housekeeping there. We appreciate your cooperation. And we'll get started. A lot of students think that if they are bringing Tylenol or Motrin or something that's over the counter to school, it's okay just to carry it in their pocket, in their backpack, in their purse, and take it as they see fit. However, the rules for over-the-counter medication are exactly the same as they are for prescription medication. So students, if you have any medicines that you're supposed to take at school, whether they're prescription or over-the-counter, they need to be checked into the high school office. Ideally, your parents bring them into us in their original containers with documentation that tells us how much you're supposed to get as a dose and how often you can receive it. But if that's not going to be feasible, then as long as you bring it to us right at the start of the student day, then that will work out okay. The exception to this rule is students who need to carry an asthma inhaler, and that's a handful of you, and students that need to carry an EpiPen for allergic reactions such as potentially bee stings, a very common one. If you need to carry an asthma inhaler or an EpiPen, or maybe there's some other medication I'm not covering right now that needs to be carried with the student at all times, then that's certainly fine, so long as we have a note from your doctor, not just a note from your parent, but a note from your doctor stating that you need to carry those things. So with the exception of asthma inhalers, EpiPens, or maybe the unique medical prescription that I'm not thinking of right now, all medicines need to be checked into the high school office in their original containers with a note from parents to describe how often and how much of this medicine they can take. Students, please be aware, if you self-medicate, or even worse, if you give some of your medicines to another student, that is grounds for up to a 10-day suspension for school. It's just not safe for students to be taking things that are not prescribed to them. So even though you might not think giving your friend a couple of Tylenol when he or she has a headache is a big deal, it kind of is a big deal. So please pay attention to this one. Again, students, this is where you would initial here on this line, and now we will move on. Lost and stolen items. The fact is, I want to be sympathetic to any of you who lose or have an item stolen here at school, and whether it's lost or stolen, we will do what we can to help you recover it. But if you don't want something lost or stolen, then I encourage you not to bring it to school, and understand that we are not responsible for anything that might get lost or stolen here at school. Now, would-be thieves, that doesn't mean if you steal something from somebody, we're not going to punish you. Chances are good that if you steal something with the quality of the camera system that we have now, plus the one that we're looking to get later in the year as part of an upgrade, chances are great that you're going to get caught on that. I just want students to be aware that seldom will it be the top priority of the office staff to address items that are lost or stolen. So if you don't want it lost or stolen, don't bring it to school. And if you do bring it to school, understand the school's not responsible for it. Next is the acceptable use policy. Every time you turn on a school device, whether it be one of our desktop computers in the 2 classrooms that have computer labs, or whether it be the Chromebook that you use in virtually every class, when you sign in, you click. You probably don't even pay attention when you do, but you click a little notice that says you understand that you're bound by Sandusky Community Schools' acceptable use policy for technology. The biggest thing for students to understand is this is the school's Google account. It's the school's device. Even though it may be issued in your name, they don't belong to you, just like a math textbook or a novel you get from your English teacher don't belong to you either. They're just tools we give you to assist you with your learning. There's no expectation to privacy when you're using a school device, and there's no expectation of privacy that you should have when you're using a school account. We don't make a habit out of it, but when we need to, and this happens 3 or 4 times a year, we absolutely can go into student email accounts or student Google accounts and see what's been going on. Again, we would only do that with good reason, but inevitably circumstances happen throughout the year that require us to do that. Especially for our younger students, I want to make sure you understand your school email accounts are not social media. They're not to be used as an instant messaging type situation. And if I'm thinking of our 7th and 8th grade students, that's something that we encounter almost every year and have to address. So if students understand that now, that maybe saves us a little bit of time later. Our attendance policy, obviously with COVID last year and possibly this year, we're going to have to expect some students may need to miss more days of school than usual. So this policy that's in our handbook remains in the handbook, but notice it's talking about 9 or more unexcused absences in a semester. We fully understand that just like last year, there's going to be times when some students need to miss more school because of illness and possibly due to quarantine situations. Just understand that an unexcused absence is an absence where nobody calls ahead to let us know what's going on. And if it's one of those situations where you need to miss school for a medical reason, whether it be an illness or simply a doctor's appointment, absences that don't get supported by a doctor's note. So if you're going to be gone from school on any particular day, make sure that your families call in to let us know. And if these are going to be lengthy absences, or if they're absences caused for a medical reason like illness or doctor's visits, please make sure that we have the appropriate documentation in the office. Again, you should be initialing each of these line items as we go through them. Our closed campus policy, students need to be aware that once you arrive here at school, you're not permitted to leave during the school day. There are exceptions for doctor's appointments that we know about in advance, but you're not allowed to, for example, run home because you forgot your homework and then come back to school, nor are you allowed to leave during the school day to go get lunch. The only time you can leave during the school day is with the appropriate documentation, and that typically would be for a doctor's appointment. Otherwise, if you're leaving, you are expected to not return for the remainder of the school day. Now, one area that has sort of come into our attention the last year or so is students in the morning arriving at school, whether they're dropped off by parents or off the school bus or whatever it may be, coming into the school building and heading out to our parking lot to hang out with friends in the parking lot. Understand that is also a violation of our closed campus policy. Once you arrive in the school building, you need to stay in the school building. And students who drive to school, we're revamping our parking registration forms to sort of emphasize the fact that once you arrive at school, you're not allowed to hang out in the parking lot. So that's an area of emphasis for us this year as well. So those of you that may have become accustomed to arriving at school and hanging out in a friend's vehicle last year, please understand that's not going to be permitted going forward. Cell phone policy, I can make this one really quick. Our school allows you to bring a cell phone to school, but each classroom teacher gets to decide how phones can be used. And throughout your 7 class periods, how the different teachers want you to be utilizing your phones could be vastly different. If you have a teacher that says, I don't want to see your phones at all during instructional time, then I fully support that. If you have a teacher who says, I don't care if you have your phone out so long as you're not distracted by it, I'm okay with that as well. If we're going to allow teachers to have the ability to set their own rules, then students need to be flexible and understanding that some teachers are going to be more strict with it than others are. If a teacher ever requests a student to turn in their cell phone because it's being misused, students need to know that failure to do so can not only impact your cell phone privileges going forward, it also can result in an immediate suspension. Over the years, some students have tried to argue that since the school doesn't pay for the cell phone or pay for the data plan that supports it, that they don't have to turn phones over upon request. That is not true. So if your teacher ever asks for the cell phone, I strongly recommend that you give them the cell phone and accept whatever cell phone timeout they're giving you. Could be they give it back to you at the end of the hour, could be they bring it down to the office at the end of the day. We're going to be reasonable with students on first offenses, but if students refuse to turn over their cell phones when requested by school staff, teachers, or administration, then we are going to have to ratchet up the consequences kind of quickly. Bullying and harassment. Every school has a bullying and harassment policy. A lot of schools across the nation have it worded very similarly because it comes from federal laws. In Michigan, there's some state laws that refer to this as well. And so this is just my reminder at the start of the year to all students that we should not be bullying, we should not be harassing, we should not be hazing our classmates. We shouldn't do that at any time, we shouldn't do that for any reason, but I want to give particular focus to bullying, harassment, and hazing that might occur based on a student's race, a student's religion, a student's ethnicity, and or their LGBTQ status. In addition to all the reasons why we know we shouldn't pick on other people, if you're harassing or bullying somebody based on race, religion, ethnicity, and or LGBTQ status, you're also running afoul of federal laws that protect people from such behavior. So please understand that any bullying or harassment is going to be dealt with swiftly once we identify it and have a chance to investigate and talk to people about it. And if there's bullying or harassment that has to do with race, religion, ethnicity, and or LGBTQ status, understand that your consequences are going to be pretty severe. So let's try to avoid those situations and just treat everyone with the decency that we all want to be treated with ourselves. Weapons policy. Obviously, you know you shouldn't bring weapons to school. The reason I include this every year is because there's a misconception among students that some knives may be okay to bring to school. What you need to understand is there is no such thing as a knife that is okay to bring to school. This includes a small pen knife, this includes box cutters, and of course this includes much larger knives that have blades of 3 inches or more. Where students sometimes get confused is because they've heard something about a 3-inch blade on a knife. Be aware that the reason you've heard of that before is if you're caught with a knife at school that is 3 inches or larger when measuring the blade, that just means that you're automatically going to go in front of the school board. If you have a knife that's smaller than that, then myself or Mrs. Kravitsky probably can deal with the consequences, but there still are going to be consequences. The only way to avoid consequences is if you recognize that you mistakenly brought the weapon to school and you give it to the nearest staff member, whether that's your bus driver, your classroom teacher, an office staff member, right away. If you bring it to us, we'll be reasonable with you, but if you try to hide it from us and it gets discovered during the school day, there'll be consequences. Again, this is where you need to sign that we've gone over this, and you can check out this website to email me any questions that you may have. Thanks for your time.